Welcome to your 2020 top positional rankings by Blitzalytics. Here are your hosts, Jack Bourgeois, Alexander Amir, and Roy Countryman.
What's going on today, guys?
How's it going? Super excited to be here. I gotta say, with no sports going on right now, like live sports, this is exactly what I needed. Being able to break down the draft in depth like this. Super excited.
Exactly what Alexander said. What a better way to get a group of our best scouts here together to break down your quarterback needs for this year's draft.
From the scouting encyclopedia, that makes me feel warm inside. He said the best scouts. I don't think we are, but I appreciate you blowing you know what up or you know what. So thank you. Thank you. So today we're going to be doing the top 5 quarterback prospects. This is number 2 of the series. We just did the wide receivers. Moving on to the quarterbacks. We're going to be dropping these from now until the draft. We've got about a month to go and plenty of scouting reports to be released here in the next couple days. All kinds of stuff going on with Blitzalytics. But without further ado, we do have top 5 quarterback prospects to talk about. Alexander Amir is the one who put together this top 5 list, but I believe this is more of a consensus list. I think we're all kind of in agreement. The only one is do you value Herbert or do you value Love? I mean, some prospects or some scouts, I should say, have them flip-flop, but this top 5 is pretty much a consensus top 5, not only within Blitzalytics, but across the board. I know from every scout we've talked to, the top 5 quarterbacks are the top 5 quarterbacks. Some people, maybe have a far-fetched guy. Maybe some people value Jalen Hurts over a guy like Jacob Eason. That one for us was hard to throw Jalen Hurts in there. I think he has a couple years to go until he's going to be in the conversation for one of these quarterbacks, but you never know. So without further ado,
number 5, Jacob Eason, quarterback.
Shit.
So just let me stay. We'll just keep it rolling and then just cut this out, and I'll do from number 5. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Get it ready. There you go.
All right. Now I got more work to do.
Get it right, Jack.
Shut your mouth. All right.
This better be cut.
3, 2, 3, 2.
Number 5, Jacob Eason, quarterback, University of Washington.
So Jacob Eason's 22 years old, coming out of the University of Washington. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school and ranked the best player in the 2016 recruiting class. He spent his first 2 years of college at Georgia, started 12 out of 13 games as a freshman, suffered a knee injury early in 2017 and missed most of that season. Transferred to Washington to get a starting job. He redshirted due to eligibility rules and then played at Washington. His 2019 college stats are 3,100 plus yards, 23-8 touchdown to interception ratio, 64% completion percentage, and 7.7 yards per attempt. So not bad numbers at all. Pretty solid numbers, I think, for Washington. In terms of traits, there's a big mixed bag. You guys want me to go into the strengths right now?
Go for it, Alexander. Let's hear your breakdown of them.
Sure. So I think his most impressive trait, he's an extremely strong arm, probably the strongest arm in the draft. He can make throws to all areas of the field. He gets great zip out of his hand no matter what his base looks like, whether it's on the run or in the pocket. The velocity coming out of his hand is really, really good. And while people do say arm strength is overrated, I think the ability to get velocity on your throws from all areas is really important. So I do like that he has that. He also can get some nice touch on the ball. He has a really nice deep ball with touch, timing, and anticipation. Outside of his arm talent, he's not scared to stay in the face of pressure, almost to a fault, actually. He stands in the pocket a little bit too long. We'll get into his weaknesses later, but he's no problem standing in pressure, taking a hit while delivering a throw. He's very decisive. As soon as he sees something, he's really wants to go for it. He's a pretty quick release, and he's a big body to take punishment when necessary.
So you touched on a lot of his strengths there, Alexander, and the biggest thing when I watch Jacob Eason is that arm. He has the natural arm talent that can make all the throws you ask of a franchise or a starting caliber quarterback. He does it in spurts where he can do in timing and with touch, but there's a consistency level that isn't to a starting level right now. And that's my biggest concern, I think, is we're going to transition into the weaknesses that I'm concerned most about him. And I think it's really just coming from an inexperience. Early on in his career, you said he did start at Georgia. He then got usurped by Jacob Fromm due to that knee injury, never got the job back. I think he would have been one of the quality of players that would have benefited for another year back at Washington. But you also can't fault a guy if he thinks he's going to be in the conversation of first or second round pick. So he's a real interesting and tantalizing prospect. I don't know if I'd take him in the top 10, but in previous years, maybe if this other top end talent wouldn't be here, it'd be a conversation piece. I mean, if Blaine Gabbert can go in the top 15 picks, why can't Jacob Eason?
For sure. And he has all those traits. And like you said, it's the consistency and it's the decision making that needs to change. He just throws into coverage too often. He locks onto his first target. And these are issues you see with a lot of young college quarterbacks. Like most of them aren't ready to go through their progressions. Most of them do throw into coverage. And, the guys with big arms tend to be gunslingers. Under pressure, he could step up in the pocket more. He's athletic, but doesn't have great escapability, which might be another knock on him. But like you said, he's super young and has a ways to go to develop, but the traits are all there.
Jack, do you have anything you want to add in here?
Teams are definitely going to fall in love with the arm talent. We've seen teams, get those big wide eyes over somebody who has that arm talent. The ability to thread the needle, throw the deep ball 60, 70 yards downfield is always going to get scouts and GMs excited. But he's got a year at least to develop. So I don't think that he needs to go into a position where he's forced to start right away. As we've seen with the NFL right now, there's plenty of good quarterbacks that are still on the market. So I think he is going to go to a team, sadly, maybe like my Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the second, third round at the very worst. I don't think he makes it to the third round, but a team that has a proven commodity at the quarterback position and that he can sit behind and grow, I think is the best way for him to be able to reach that peak talent.
Yeah, on our big board, we have him. His average is outside the top 50. He's probably roughly in the 60, 70 range for us. The highest rank is 36 on our big board. So, like you mentioned, second round seems like where we all agree that he might go. In terms of team fits, I could see, if the Chargers decide not to take a quarterback in the first round, I could see them trying to take him in the second. I could see the Raiders trying to take him the second, the Patriots later on, Panthers later on if they want to develop him behind Teddy. So it seems like there's so many teams with got like veterans that are starting at quarterback right now that I think he could go pretty much anywhere in the second round.
Now, I got a question. Do you see him maybe as a team fit for Tampa, being that they know Tom Brady only has about a year or two left and they don't have much, being that Jameis left, that they kind of need a guy to develop? He knows he's going to be sitting on the bench for a year or two. And also, just to piggyback, do you think he might be a prospect that we see a team jump up for in the late of round one, trade back in for that fifth-year option, the ability to control him for another year?
Yeah, so in terms of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I could totally see that in the second round. The one thing is, I'll skip ahead. The player comp for him, for me, is Jameis Winston, just because of the arm talent that he has, that like kind of athletic but not super athletic ability, and his lack of decision making. So, Bruce Arians clearly hates Jameis Winston. It's pretty well documented at this point. And so I don't know if he wants to replicate that again with Eason, but Eason's not as, much of a head case as Jameis Winston might be. And who knows how long Bruce Arians is going to be coaching. If he wins the Super Bowl with Tom Brady over the next couple of years, he might just retire. So I could totally see that happening with the Bucs. And in terms of trading up for Eason, I think it depends how the first round falls. If the top four quarterbacks, if Love, Herbert, Tua, and Burrow all go within the top 10 to 15 picks, I could see a team potentially jumping up from the second to late first for him. But I think it just depends how the rest of it falls.
As a Bucs fan, I don't want him. I want surround talent with or Tom Brady with talent. I think that's exactly what they will do. Next year, I believe they'll probably try to put a quarterback behind Tom Brady. Just not this year, but you never know. And again, that with that pro comp of being Jameis Winston, I don't know if they want to go right down that route again in just a few years after Brady finally hangs it up.
Yeah, so in terms of projected rookie year production, I think if teams were smart, like we've alluded to, they'd sit Eason behind a veteran QB. I don't think he will end up starting in his first year, just because the teams that are likely to take him are guys that are teams that are likely to have guys in place already. If he does end up starting, I could see him starting around the halfway point of the season, and I could potentially see it with a team like the Panthers or Chargers. They have Tyrod and Teddy Bridgewater. If Teddy hopefully doesn't, but might get hurt again, or if Tyrod Taylor's ineffective, I could see him starting it like right after the bye week. I could see a trajectory a little bit like Sam Darnold. So, Darnold was super inconsistent to start, a bunch of interception, slowly improved his decision making and ability to deal with NFL speed. So I could kind of see a trajectory like that during his first year starting, or just even throughout the early parts of his career.
Yeah, I think he's going to be at the top of the second. Maybe if somebody loves him, they'll move up, like you said.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this real quick. What do you said Jameis Winston's the player comp. Now, is that going to be ceiling on that, or if not, what do you think his ceiling is as far as if he hits on all cylinders with the right situation?
Yeah, so Jameis is kind of just like stylistically what he reminds me of. I think his ceiling is kind of like Jameis' ceiling if he didn't throw so many interceptions to linebackers and didn't make such boneheaded decisions. Like, I think his arm talent's no doubt there, and I think he could be a perennial Pro Bowler if he is able to like adjust to NFL speed and improve the decision making. In terms of career floor, if he doesn't develop at all, I could see him as a backup who can win you a few games based on arm talent, kind of like Jameis. Despite the 30 interception or 42 turnovers, he was able to take the Bucs to a 7-9 record, and he's done so pretty consistently throughout his career. So that's kind of how I see the career panning out.
Let me throw two names out here for floor and ceiling. Floor for me, for Eason, he reminds me of Derek Anderson, who had that one great year for Cleveland. He made a Pro Bowl, but he's been a consistent backup. I think that's the floor, at least for Jacob Eason. His ceiling, I think if he hits on all cylinders, is Big Ben. He doesn't have the escapability, but he has a similar type build. He throws a vertical type offense who could maybe later on in his career refine himself to throw the intermediate routes a lot better with timing. But initially, he's going to win by his vertical throwing ability and the escapability out of the pocket.
Could you see a team like the Steelers grabbing him in the second?
I don't see them. I don't actually see the Steelers taking a quarterback at all this year, but if it would be, that would be one of the fits I would hope they would go for if they're looking for a quarterback in the same mold of Big Ben for the era after he retires. He would definitely be a player that I would hope they would target because he does have a similar stature, similar skill set, and he could let him sit behind and learn basically from what maybe his upside would be.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Number 4, Justin Herbert, quarterback, Oregon.
So Justin Herbert, he's 22 years old. He spent his whole life in Eugene, Oregon, went to high school there, grew up there, college there. He was a 3-star prospect entering college, but became the first true freshman to start at Oregon since 1983. He made 7 starts and finished 3rd in the Pac-12 in passer rating that year. Started 8 games as a sophomore, missed 5 games due to a collarbone injury. And then as a junior, finally put it all together and started all 13 games, earned Phil Steele and coach's all-conference honors, and was a semifinalist for the Davey O'Brien Award. In 2019. Before I get to his stats, I think one thing to note that I kind of like about him is he has a 4.01 GPA in biology, wants to go to med school, and was like a prestigious teaching assistant at Oregon. So that just goes to show you he's extremely smart, and I'm hoping that can translate to the football field as he gets to the NFL. His 2019 stats, he had 3,400 plus yards, 32-6 touchdown to interception ratio, 66.8 completion percentage, which improved by a ton from last year. I think it was close to 10 percentage points from last year's completion percentage, and 8.1 yards per attempt. The numbers improved across the board from 2018, and he also had one of the best offensive line units in the nation with Shane Lemieux, Calvin Throckmorton, who are going to be in the draft this year, and Penny Sewell, who's going to probably going to be a top 5-10 pick in next year's draft. So now in terms of his strengths, similarly to Eason, he has a really, really great arm, both in terms of the deep ball and velocity. He throws a really nice spiral, an easy and catchable ball. He's a great athlete with mobility, and he's a big rushing threat. He ran a 4.68 40-yard dash. He has the prototypical quarterback size at 6'6", 236 pounds with 10-inch hands. I really like his mechanics and his delivery. He releases over the top, maintains his base, and makes nice adjustments to his arm angles and shoulder level. When he's throwing to different levels of the field. He has excellent footwork and balance. Rolling out, he looks super comfortable throwing from a balanced base. And he has a very quick release. He releases the ball a little bit low, but he is 6'6", and it's a quick release. He has very good accuracy in general, especially in short and intermediate routes that require velocity. And he's very smart, like I alluded to. He's also had 3 different head coaches and systems in his time at Oregon. Played pretty well in all of them.
Go for it, Roy.
Yeah, I mean, Herbert's everything you look for when you're looking for the ingredients to making that franchise quarterback cake. I mean, he has everything, whether it's sugar and spice. He puts up the highlight reels, and he's got the consistency too. He's got the base that's really impressive for me. You touched on it. His footwork is one of the better of the top 4 quarterbacks in this class. He has a really good understanding of being able to build the platform from the bottom up. And a lot of quarterbacks, that takes a long time. I know Kurt Warner is one of the biggest proponents of footwork when it comes to being a success. And he's one of the most impressive I've seen this year in this draft class. His accuracy to me is very good, as you said, but he does have some stretches where he'll try to all-arm throw things and throw it through a receiver rather than touch. So he needs to work on that touch throw more than anything. But athletically, definitely what you want to run an RPO-type system. Can break, contain. After being pressured up the middle, he can break the pocket and throw downfield. He's just a really impressive player, and as you said, really smart guy. Definitely one of the top contenders to be coming off the board early this year.
I'll agree with you from the standpoint that he's got that cannon for an arm. He lacks touch. I don't know if I ever seen him drop it in the breadbasket. It's usually a dart. It's got more of that Michael Vick type of approach. Just get the ball there than it is to get the ball over the second level into the defender's hand or over the defender. To me, he definitely need to work on the touch throws. You can see it as I'm saying it, he makes a really good touch throw on the highlight reel. But still, it's very rare that you see that. That being said, though, the footwork is there. The athleticism was there. We've seen it in the bowl game. They relied on his feet more so than his arm, and he's able to get it done. So I think in today's NFL, he's definitely going to be, probably walking right into that LA Chargers starting role week 1, and will be able to win games with his feet as he matures as a quarterback.
Yeah, and I think in terms of his weaknesses, I think Oregon's offense held him back a lot because he wasn't really required to scan the field ever. Like, he knew where his first read was going to be. It was a spread offense, quick hit offense, with the number 1 option is pretty much where he was going the entire time. That's the first big thing. And then the second big thing is under pressure. He is very good at breaking the pocket and making throws on the run, but he does get skittish in a collapsing pocket, can panic sometimes, particularly when it's from the interior. He doesn't step up in the pocket also when pressure's coming off the edge. He kind of either decides to avoid it with his legs or just make the throw under pressure. And he can also flee the pocket a little bit too early. So I think those two things, being a little bit afraid with pressure coming in his face and the system, is holding him back. So I think he's going to have to adjust to NFL speed and to making more complex reads mentally. But again, like we said, he's plenty smart to be able to do that.
Where do you see him ending up?
The Chargers are probably the most likely scenario, assuming the Dolphins end up with Tua. I feel like the Chargers aren't going to pass on him. On our big board, we have him an average of 20. The high is 17, the low is 25. So like I said, the Chargers are probably the team that are going to take him. If not the Chargers or Dolphins, could see potentially the Raiders might take him to back up Derek Carr for a year and then take over, because the John Gruden-Carr relationship isn't great, and the Raiders do have a roster that can support a young QB. If not these teams, if those 3 teams don't take him, he might drop, because the QB market is super saturated right now. And, who knows if teams are a little bit worried about Herbert. He doesn't have the same hype that he did have last year. He might drop to a little bit later in the draft, and, he could go to any team if that happens.
Now, I got a question for you for 2 team fits here. Do you see Carolina maybe targeting him with a Matt Roll type? And just to get real off the wall, being that there's rumors out there that Washington is potentially looking at like a Tua, could you see a Ron Rivera maybe targeting another athletic and big-bodied quarterback like Justin Herbert in a Cam Newton role if he's not convinced that Haskins is going to be their franchise guy at 2?
So if that happens, I feel like they're not going to take Herbert at 2. I feel like Tua would be more likely for them to take at 2 if they do want to do that with a quarterback. again, he is like a Haskins type role, but they also don't love Haskins. And, he is more like Cam than Tua is, but I feel like Tua is just too much of a sure thing over Herbert, injuries aside, for them to not do that at Tua, especially if they're going to replace Haskins and need that production now. And in terms of the Panthers, I feel like with the acquisition of Teddy Bridgewater, I don't think they're a candidate to take a quarterback in the top 10, but also who knows, Rule might want his quarterback, to groom for the future and learn behind Teddy, who's a really smart veteran quarterback.
I see your pro comp. Who do you got?
So he reminds me of Josh Allen a lot. He has the big arm, he has the athleticism. This is Roy's comp for him too, I believe. Yeah, the big arm, the athleticism, the processing skills can improve a little bit. But just the athletic profile fits super well with Josh Allen.
Yeah, I think that's a good fit because, again, Josh Allen doesn't have the touch throws just yet, is athletic enough to convert third downs when need to, extend drives when need to with his feet. I think that's a perfect fit.
Yeah, I think that would be the ceiling for him. I think Josh Allen, I think he can have that immediate impact. I see his floor right now, guys, as Jake Locker. Coming out of Washington a few years ago, he had the athletic profile similar to what Herbert has now. He was more of a scrambling type, and the accuracy, he had all arm, and the accuracy was really spotty. So that would be my floor for Herbert at this point, would be a Jake Locker, where he gets a chance to start some games and kind of tail off.
I could see that. The decision making for me is the biggest thing. He tends to rely on that arm strength a little too much. And to me, he does make some bonehead Jameis-like throws at times, and just kind of throws into double and triple coverage, just thinking that he can thread the needle. That's not gonna happen at the next level. The defensive backs are just far too athletic to let him thread the needle. He'll still be able to do it, but if he's throwing those interceptions now at Oregon against Pac-12, just wait until you get to the next level. It could get really ugly really quick for Justin Herbert. So I think there is a big bust factor that should be tied to Herbert's name.
And that's what I want to ask you about, Alex. What scares you the most? You're in the war room on draft day. You're getting ready to pull the trigger on Herbert. But what's your biggest fear in the back of your mind with this guy?
Yeah, it's got to be how simple the Oregon offense was. And just he wasn't asked to do anything mentally that he's going to have to do in the pro game. And, obviously that's teachable, but, you need the instincts, you need the ability to play under pressure, and you have to show some semblance of that at college, and he showed very little. I do think his ceiling is above Josh Allen's because I think his accuracy is better, but the floor is very low because of that. And as smart as he is, it's also different being classroom smart and football smart. So he has the intelligence, he has all the athletic traits, but he has a long ways to develop to be comfortable in a pro game.
Number 3. Jordan Love, quarterback, Washington State.
So Jordan Love is a fan favorite of Blitz.
Utah State.
Sorry about that. I typed that wrong, and I was thinking of other QBs, and I was putting that together.
You guys know I'm going to Ron Burgundy it. I'm going to read whatever's on the teleprompter.
He's 21 years old, out of Utah State. He's a fan favorite of Blitz. I think all of our scouts are super high on Jordan Love. So in terms of his college accolades, he started for the past 2.5 seasons after redshirting a year. He earned second team All-Mountain West in 2018 and earned honorable mention All-Mountain West in 2019. He was a semifinalist this year for the Davey O'Brien Award for Best QB in the Nation and holds 8 single-season school records, including completions, attempts, touchdowns, passing yards, and some others. His 2019 stats, he had 3,400-plus yards, 20-17 touchdown interception ratio, which was way up from his 32-6 touchdown interception ratio in 2018. It's a little bit concerning, though his offensive line was really, really bad. He had just under 62% completion percentage, 7.2 yards per attempt, and he also attempted 473 passes. So his numbers were a little bit worse across the board in 2019 from 2018, but the traits are all there. Utah State had a new coaching staff and offense, very bad offensive line that suffered through injury and was very young. So in terms of his strength, he has excellent arm talent. The ball darts out of his hands. He has as much arm strength as you'd want. He's a super unique ability to play outside the pocket, throw from weird bases and arm angles. He keeps his eyes downfield when he does so, and has great footwork, gets his hips around to deliver a strong ball on the move. He's super comfortable playing in space and playing when he's uncomfortable. He doesn't get rattled under pressure. He's very calm in the backfield, even when scrambling. And he shows some outstanding accuracy at times. It's inconsistent, but he fits some slants down the middle, particularly into extremely tight windows where only the receiver can catch it. And he's a pretty good feel for fitting the ball between the defender and the sideline as well. So I know, Roy, he's one of your favorite quarterbacks as well, I think for similar reasons.
Yeah, I would actually, I'd be hard pressed to take Justin Herbert over Jordan Love, just because of the untapped potential. For him, I know a lot of people's first concern is when they see that touchdown to interception rate. He had a lot of receivers. Ronquavian Tarver left early for the draft last year. He didn't have a lot of talent around him, and he really put the Superman cape on and tried to do too much earlier in the year. That arm talent is simply ridiculous. The ability to throw off platform and manipulate his throwing ability to fit the windows and the throwing lanes are something I haven't seen a lot of, with the exception of Patrick Mahomes whenever he was coming out of Texas Tech. The ability to break the pocket with speed and quickness, and he had spurts where he fit the ball in tight windows and with touch down the field. Was quite impressive, especially if you go back and watch some of his 18 tape when he had more talent, was very impressive. And the other thing with me when I was doing his report is if you watch an early in the season game and then late in the season game, especially his bowl game, you could tell he was making concerted effort to throw the ball away rather than trying to fit it into the tight windows that weren't even there. You could tell he was already taking the criticism to heart and knowing that I'm making too many turnover-worthy throws and to just live to play another down. So that to me shows the coachability is there. He's willing to learn. And I would say this guy is probably the biggest lottery ticket when it comes to the quarterbacks in this whole entire draft class. His upside to me is twice of what Joe Burrow's could be. And I know that's something very outlandish to say, but the type of arm talent that he has and the abilities that he has off platform are unique. And that's why I would take him even over a Justin Herbert.
There's a reason why guys like Matt Miller were talking about this being a Patrick Mahomes 2.0 or Patrick Mahomes light type of quarterback because of what he's able to do, like you said, off platform. I mean, some of the best throws we've seen him make is either on one foot or no feet at all. You know, there's a few highlight reels of him jumping out of bounds and still completing a 60-yard pass, and that's with little to absolute no talent around him. So when you think about upside, if I'm taking a swing, this is definitely a swing for the fences. I think he may have the highest ceiling and the lowest floor out of any of these quarterbacks because he's unproven. But what we've seen in person at the Senior Bowl, at least in practice during the game, again, all of those quarterbacks, it was very hard to ask them to look good when the defensive lines were dominating in the Senior Bowl. But he made throws consistently throughout that week that showcased why he should be in consideration over Justin Herbert, in my personal opinion. Blitz consensusly feels that way, but it's hard. They're kind of split right down the middle between 3 and 4 across the board.
Yeah, it was definitely tough for me to make this decision. Roy, I like that you alluded to the point about his interceptions and how he cut down on trying to throw into coverage. I think a lot of the interception problems and the accuracy issues has to do a lot with him telegraphing his throws, and he doesn't necessarily lock onto his first read, and he doesn't anticipate his routes as much as he could have and closes open windows. So I think it's a lot less of him making poor decisions, so much as just his processing and decision making needs to get a little bit faster. So I like that a lot. His accuracy is erratic. He can get overzealous and overthrow. Ball placement is inconsistent. Mechanics are inconsistent too. Even though he's able to throw off a platform in the pocket, the mechanics are a little bit inconsistent. He also decides to leave the pocket too soon sometimes, isn't as comfortable playing in a collapsing pocket. But I agree, all those traits are all there. And he does some super, super impressive things.
And the thing was Utah State's, especially this past year, was a lot of telegraph first reads in what he was throwing. So, and for me, whenever you look at the total package of Jordan Love, I look at are his traits that are uncoachable, are the things that he has and the elite traits that he possesses way more than the things that are coachable. Everything you just listed with his weaknesses are coachable, especially when you put him in a structured NFL coaching staff with a quarterback coach. His footwork needs refinement, so did Patrick Mahomes. And This guy is the lottery ticket I would punch if I'm looking for a quarterback. And that's nothing against Tua. I love his skill set and even Joe Burrow. But if I had to make a quarterback call just for upside and what I could have, if I was confident and I could tap into that well, I would probably take him over the rest of the other quarterbacks in this class.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, he's a swing for the fences kind of player, but with Patrick Mahomes being in the Super Bowl this year, it's proven you need one of these guys. So I'd rather swing and miss on someone with a higher ceiling than someone who could just be just another guy type.
Yeah, 100%. So on our big board, we have him at 21, which is just under Justin Herbert. His highest rank is 13, lowest rank is 27. In terms of team fits, I think the Raiders are a great fit to sit him behind Derek Carr. They decide to take him at number 12 or number 20 or whatever it is, 19, 20, around that area. Yeah. So I think that's a great fit. The Colts might take him as well. I know they just signed Phillip Rivers, but he's on his last legs. I think that's a nice person to learn behind as well. And I could kind of see the Lions taking him if he falls to the second because he's got a big arm like Stafford. Stafford's towards the end of his career, and they kind of need to hit a reset on the entire franchise. So I think being able to start fresh with Love in a couple of years would be great. And I could also see the Packers potentially taking him. It's not as certain because it feels like Packers are going to go wide receiver, give Aaron Rodgers another weapon, and try and make one last run for the Super Bowl. So I don't think they're going to use a first-round pick on him. But you never know. You never know what their plans are for the future.
I mean, that is a very Green Bay-like move to make, to go lock up their new quarterback of the future and then have him sit behind an Aaron Rodgers. But is Aaron Rodgers, I mean, Brett Favre wasn't necessarily that mentor to Aaron Rodgers. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers would kind of treat him the same way and force him to learn on his own.
Yeah, for me, there's two teams that I'm looking at, and they're not even in the top 15 picks. I think you're really going to see a team like a Kansas City when Mahomes came out, thinking that this guy is the lottery ticket's going to get them over the hump. I see somebody probably mortgaging a little bit of their future to go up and get this quarterback for upside. And I think it's either going to be New Orleans or New England. And I think that New Orleans would be the absolute perfect fit for him to sit behind Drew Brees. Very similar to Mahomes when he sat behind Alex Smith, the professional's professional, letting him be the tutor and then turning the keys over to him to be the next great thing. That offense with Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and Emmanuel Sanders with Jordan Love, good luck. And even in New England, I know everybody's talking about Jared Stidham, but I think after seeing the success that Lamar Jackson's had and even Mahomes, I think Bill Belichick wants to retool his idea for the way he's looking at quarterbacks here and what he wants to value going forward into this next, however many years he wants to coach. And that would maybe be an intriguing fit to get his hands on a guy and let Josh McDaniels kind of let him develop and see that upside with his throwing ability and his athleticism that he hasn't had in 20-plus years.
If the medicals come back and Tua isn't as healthy as we think he is, could Miami take the best player available at the top of the draft and then come back with those second two first-round picks, move back up and grab a Jordan Love?
I mean, it's very possible. That would be a very shrewd move on their part to take a quality player at 5, like a Kinlaw or even a Derek Brown or maybe some other guys that may drop in there. Maybe even get Jerry Jeudy to get a top tier receiver, and then back right back up and get their franchise quarterback.
Let me ask you this, Alex. What was it ultimately that during tape watching where you said, I'm going to give the edge to Love over Herbert? Was there one specific trait or quality that you said that's why I'm going him?
I think part of it has to do with Herbert and his lack of ability to play, or the lack of ability to show that he can play in a pro-style scheme. But also, my player comp for Jordan Love is Patrick Mahomes. Now, before everyone gets mad, I'm not saying he is Patrick Mahomes. I'm not saying he's going to be Patrick Mahomes. But the way he plays outside of the pocket and the way he's able to make throws all over the place from the weirdest bases, the weirdest arm angles, reminds me of Patrick Mahomes. And like the way he's able to scan the field while doing so reminds me of Patrick Mahomes. So I think those traits are such rare things to have. Plus the arm talent, that arm strength, he's all the arm strength you would need. I think it's a combination of those things that slid Jordan Love above Herbert.
Number 2, Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback, Alabama.
So Tua's 22 years old. You guys all know him. He was a unanimous top dual threat QB in his recruiting class. Saw some game action during his true freshman season, and then famously replaced the ineffective Jalen Hurts at halftime of the College Football Playoff Championship. He led Alabama to overtime victory against Georgia and was named Offensive MVP of the game. As a sophomore, he won the Maxwell Award and was the Walter Camp winner for Best College Football Player, Consensus All-American, set the record for FBS passer rating. He was the offensive MVP against Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl. And while he showed mixed results in the College Football Championship loss against Clemson, the blowout loss, that's when he really came onto the map and showed that he can be a true franchise quarterback. As a junior, the injury issues mounted. He had a high ankle sprain in Week 6 against Tennessee. Returned 3 weeks later, and then a couple of weeks after that, he dislocated his hip in a season-ending injury. Thankfully, he's been recovering pretty well. He's shown videos of him throwing, walking around, and seems like he's been recovering pretty well. So, as everyone knows, he has a significant injury history with a number of lower body ailments. He's shown an ability to bounce back from those ailments, but it's concerning that he has a weak lower body. In terms of his stats before the injury, in 9 games, he had 2,840 yards, a 33-3 touchdown interception ratio, 71.4 completion percentage, and 11.3 yards per attempt. So those are elite numbers for just playing 9 games in a season. In terms of his strengths, so Tua's pro readiness is extremely impressive. His really sound and consistent footwork and mechanics allow him to deliver the ball with accuracy to all levels of the field. His quick release helps him hit receivers in tight windows, and he follows through on most throws to make sure there's adequate velocity. He's comfortable stepping up and moving around the pocket while keeping his eyes downfield. He's good at eluding in the pocket, kind of like Tom Brady does, just taking side steps without actually breaking the pocket. He can make throws in the face of pressure too. Mentally, Tua is very comfortable going through his reads, understands the defense, and has very good instincts. His all-around accuracy is great, and he has particularly impressive touch on his deep balls. And he also has enough athleticism to be a threat with his legs, both when escaping the pass rush and when picking up yardage.
Yeah, he's the total package when it comes to being pro ready right now. He'd be with his anticipation and his ability to put touch on throws, especially with leading receivers or throwing passes before they're even breaking out their routes. The ability to pick up that yak yards after, he's probably one of the best, if not the best in this category. Really from the shoulders up, he is prepared as an NFL starter right now. His build is somewhat alarming with the injuries he's had to his base, as we talked with Herbert, and that's where really you start the foundation of having accuracy and being a quality quarterback from your bottom to the top. That's what's really concerning to me with the hip problem, the 2 ankle injuries. That's the red flag for me in his case. But other than that, he has enough arm talent to make all the throws. The anticipation and the accuracy are off the board and are really something to behold coming from a college level.
Yeah, reading defenses, I think, is what he does best and does better than anybody inside this top 5. Burrow was more of that spread, wide open offense. This was a little bit more closer to a pro-style offense, and the fact that he had 3 number 1 wide receivers, I mean, yeah, it makes it a lot easier on a quarterback, but it also means that he did have to go through his progressions, or he had the opportunity to go through his progressions on multiple plays. What I noticed more than anything when breaking down the Jerry Jeudy film is that the ball was consistently there on time. Timing routes, hitting a guy in stride, never having to slow down, never having to contort their body to get the ball, that might have been behind them or anything like that. I mean, it is spot on accuracy from the touch throws to the deep ball. Everything he does is near perfect. And if it wouldn't be for this injury history that he has, there really would be a much better argument for him possibly being the number 1 overall quarterback. Alex, I got to ask you, what do you think is a bigger bust potential? I think if he stays healthy, that he's a home run hit. There's no questions asked that he has all the tools, all the intangibles to be a pro-ready quarterback. Is his injury risk as much in a percentage based as Jordan Love's bust rate is? Which one's higher? Jordan Love's bust rate as a player or Tua's injury rate?
I honestly think it's Tua's injury rate. He's been able to bounce back from the injuries, but it scares the shit out of me to see that hip, the way it was a terrible injury to his hip. He's had multiple ankle sprains, and he's a small guy. He's 6'1", 200 something pounds. He's not a super big guy. He can't take that kind of punishment. And this was behind a very, very good offensive line, and the injury history is really, really concerning, especially because, like Roy said, the accuracy is all built from the base up. So I don't know, if he does suffer more injuries to his lower body, like what happens to that? His escapability becomes worse. Yeah, I don't know. I think his floor is lower than anyone's in the class just because of the injury history.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think if you can't not take the risk, but you have to know what you've got, and you have to almost assume you're going to either redshirt them, or you better have a good quality backup right there. A Fitzmagic type to be able to step in if need be come that year one.
Yeah, for sure. So on our big board, we have him. His high is 6. His low is 26. So we have one scout who's quite low on him, I guess, relative to everyone else. But his average is 9, so I think that's partly with the injury risk baked in. There are a couple areas that Tua lacks in his game that could improve a bit. Under pressure, he could rush his release a little bit. His arm strength is fine, but unspectacular. And sometimes he has to put in extra work to get enough juice on his throws. No quarterback is perfect. He just has a couple little things. But again, the injury concern is just way too much. And my floor, honestly, his ceiling, I think, is a top 8 QB in the NFL, top 5 QB in the NFL even. His floor is out of the league due to injury.
Yeah, and his ceiling and floor, for me, his ceiling, like you said, top 8 quarterback. I see, lofty comparisons we're throwing out there for these quarterbacks, but Drew Brees is one for one with his anticipatory throws and his accuracy and touch. You can see that's similar to as his lower half. That would be my comp for the ceiling part. His floor, to me, that's more of an interesting take. I would say his floor is maybe like an Andy Dalton type, to where he has good accuracy, decent athleticism, but he's always just going to be a low-end starter, and that's due to the injury. Nothing else because of his skill set, just basically for injury. That's what hampers him to put him down to that skill set level.
And let me ask you this, Alex, because again, this is going to be a topic of contention here. If injury was no concern, does your top 5 still fall out like this, or is Tua number 1?
It's really tough. I'm a huge, huge fan of Joe Burrow. I think he would just be a shade higher than Tua due to some of the reasons that we'll talk about in a minute. But I mean, you couldn't go wrong with either if the injury concerns weren't an issue.
I think just with Joe Burrow having the greatest college football season by a quarterback we've ever seen, it's hard to nitpick and say that he is not. I do like your pro comp, though, of Teddy Bridgewater due to the injury concerns, but he's got the average arm, excellent arm, touch throws, and he's one of those guys that mentally he's not going to lose the game for you by making bonehead mistakes.
Yeah.
Number 1, Joe Burrow, quarterback, LSU.
So you guys all know him. You all love him. He's 23 years old, out of LSU. So coming out of high school, he was a 4-star prospect. He was from Ohio, so initially attended Ohio State. He redshirted a year and then was the backup to J.T. Barrett. Saw action in 6 games. As a redshirt sophomore, he was a backup again and saw action in just 4 games. So in order to get a starting job, he transferred to LSU. He started 13 games in his first year at LSU and went 10-3, but had a fairly low production. He had a little less than 3,000 yards, a 16-5 touchdown to interception ratio, 57.8 completion percentage, and 7.6 yards per attempt. And then in 2019, I don't know if it was a combination of his receivers, Jamar Chase coming on, Joe Brady's passing system, but he completely broke out in 2019. He was a Heisman Trophy winner, AP National Player of the Year. Literally any award you can think of, he won. Unanimous first-team All-American. He set the record for most touchdown passes in a season, number 2 completion percentage in NCAA history, Offensive Player of the Game in the College Football Championship, permanent LSU captain for 2 years, and set nearly every LSU single-season passing record. So his precise numbers are over 5,600 yards, 60 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, a 76.3 completion percentage, and 10.8 yards per attempt. So it was ridiculous how he just burst onto the scene and then put up by far the best college football season of all time. So in terms of his strengths, the reason he was able to do this, his mental makeup is absolutely special. I think the way he anticipates, his vision of the field, and his understanding of the defense is unparalleled. His elusiveness, the way LSU's offensive line was rated the #1 in the nation, but if you watch the film, a lot of that had to do with Burrow just refusing to go down. He's not particularly fast, but he has extremely good balance on his feet and escapes pressure. He keeps his eyes up while doing so and can deliver the ball from all sorts of weird angles. He has an outstanding internal clock and feel for the game and sneaky good lateral movement to make people miss in space. He has very, very good touch and timing on his deep ball. You saw him lead Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson constantly down the field. He's a natural thrower of the football. He gets his torso very engaged when throwing on the run. He can throw from weird arm angles, as I mentioned. And a whole other side of him is his competitiveness and leadership. We heard a story where when Burrow was being recruited, the coaches at LSU wanted to take him out to dinner, like a nice steak dinner, treat him to fancy stuff. And Burrow said, "No, I just want to see your offense and talk about what the offense is going to look like when I'm there." So, if that doesn't show you what his mind is, I don't know what does.
Yeah, his level of dedication to improve himself from year 1 to year 2 at LSU really speaks volumes to the work ethic this kid has. And not only that, you touched upon all of his strengths. His mental aptitude is up there. The ability to rise out of coming from Ohio State down into the Bayou, going to a completely different setting, and really captivating that entire program and region down there with his arm talent. He can make all the throws. He can throw with touch, anticipation. He can throw horizontal routes just as well as vertical routes. His athletic ability, I think, is somewhat slept on by a lot of people. He's one of the better scramblers in this entire class. And he's somebody that's going to have to be accounted for if there's an RPO type offense utilized where he's going. And there's not a lot of knocks unless you want to say you're worried about a 1-year wonder. But he really took his knocks the first year at LSU, took his lumps and learned from them and applied that into his second year. So I'm not going to really hold that against him. He's just a really overall well-rounded prospect that he's going to start for a long time in the NFL.
I cannot believe you took my insider story there, Alexander. How dare you? For me,
it's my article. It's a good piece.
It is. It was a great story to hear. And I think that was from the LSU sports director who had filled that in to me just a few weeks ago. But yeah, for me, the most impressive thing is his ability to avoid pressure while keeping his eyes downfield, and that has everything to do with just the feeling of the pressure, pocket presence, and poise. He's consistently keeping his eyes downfield, and to me, what showed it was the game against Bama. To where he was being blitzed. They had, and pressure coming up the A-gap consistently, and he would take a step to the left, a step to the right, and throw a dime, whether that was a 60-yarder or a 5-yard slant. I mean, he just knows where his wide receivers are at all times. He is a complete student of the game type. Oops. But, yeah, so for me, that it's uncomparable, undeniable that he's the clear-cut #1 in here. It's no questions asked.
For sure. And I think, Rob, you asked about Joe Burrow versus Tua, and I think Burrow just has the rare mental ability to turn something into nothing, but be consistent while doing it. Like when Sam Darnold was coming out, everyone was super into his ability to, make plays outside of the pocket, extend plays, and do some crazy things. But Burrow does all of that. Plus, he's a great pocket passer. And, his anticipation, vision, everything is just so good and consistent.
Let me ask you this before we get to the player comp. Normally I'll save the question for post-player comp, but Roy kind of touched on it. Are you at all concerned that the meteoric rise of Burrow this past season was any kind of flash in the pan? Is there any doubt in your mind, if you're the Bengals, that because, with their history, that this could be another guy who's just a flash in the pan for college? He comes up into Cincinnati and disappoints.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, no one's ever sure, and obviously, it is a little bit weird that he was able to be a flash in the pan like this. You can point to Joe Brady's passing offense. You can point to his wide receivers. But again, if you watch the film, he has that mental aspect that you can't teach, and all of his best traits are things that are not really teachable, and those are like innate things that he has. That's the reason that I don't have any questions about him. And he does have just above average arm strength. He doesn't have great arm strength. I think it's better than Tua's also. But he just has so many traits that are so rare to find that aren't a product of the system that make me feel like he's going to succeed at the NFL.
And was it the consistency of being able to do it on a game-to-game basis? Did that answer a lot of it, that it wasn't stretches of greatness followed by stretches of mediocrity? Like it was great every game all year? Did that kind of help to put those fears to rest for you?
Definitely. I can't think of a bad game that he had. I mean, I think his worst performances were the first few drives against Clemson in the national championship. But I mean, they made adjustments and obviously exploded from there. So I think he had a great game every season. It was every week, and was extremely consistent.
It's hard to even pinpoint a bad quarter, much less a bad game from Joe Burrow. Yeah. And you've seen slight flashes of it. And when talking with a lot of the LSU players, they'd seen it coming all the way dating back to last year. They were just able to put it together with the amount of talent. Again, I think how much of that was the prolific offense? How much was that having two, first-round wide receivers, having a Thaddeus Moss, having a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, having, the offensive line they did, which, again, I don't think was the clear-cut number one in college football, but was darn good. Good enough for him to make plays. But, again, I think, like Alexander alluded to, a lot of that had mostly to do with his ability to avoid pressure, not necessarily the offensive line's ability to maintain a pocket, because it was very shaky at times, especially in that Alabama game and the Clemson game too.
Yeah, for me, I just want to touch, if Cincinnati somehow messes this up and not takes them at number one, they're going to be in for another decade's worth of heckling, because you're missing out on a kid that's an Ohio kid. He's a hometown kid and a hometown product. The only way I wouldn't bash him is if they take Chase Young. And that's just how elite of a prospect he is. But Joe Burrow has to go to Cincinnati, and if he ain't going there, the whole system's going to be toppled over.
Now,
all those mock drafts are going to go in the garbage.
If you guys are sitting there and you're Joe Burrow, put yourselves in his shoes, are you pulling the Eli Manning? Because we know we've heard from since we've got into the industry how bad of a franchise this team really is. They didn't even have a scouting department with Marvin Lewis there. They still don't have an indoor facility. And from what we hear about, it's the 32nd best franchise to play for, to work for. It's just a subpar sports franchise. Would you be willing to pull that move, knowing you're going to take a hit from the media?
I think I would give it a little bit of time for Joe. I would really look at the perspective of the way they applied in free agency this year. They were always one of the teams where they sat on their cap space no matter what. They maybe re-signed some of their own players. But this was the first year you actually see them, since they had the new coaching staff and the old guard left in Marvin Lewis, that they went out and signed a couple marquee free agents. The defensive tackle, was it Reeder?
Yeah, Reeder.
He went to Cincinnati. And they signed some key guys here and threw some money around. So that, to me, if I was Joe Burrow, I think that was one of the reasons why they went out and applied themselves to free agency, was maybe to convince him and say, we're not the same team as we were before. We're going to let our coaching staff basically run the show. And if they want to go out and buy a couple free agents to come in here, we're going to let them do so. And that would give me a little bit of a pause to think and say maybe they're starting to turn the corner. But I really hate the perspective of somebody, Eli Manning a situation up where they're taking their position of power and applying it to this. I mean, you should be grateful you're in a conversation. You're as the number one overall selection. A lot of guys will be undrafted free agents, would love to have that guaranteed money.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't blame him for doing so, just because, yes, you should be grateful for that opportunity, but also you do have an entire career ahead of you, and I think it'd be a little bit silly to squander that. As good as he is, it'd be a little bit silly to squander that just for, the pride of, saying I'll play anywhere. But at the same time, he did say he would play anywhere, and he is too much of a competitor, I think, to actually pull Eli. So I think in reality, he'll play for whichever team drafts him.
Yeah, it's that almost Baker Mayfield approach of wanting to pull a team out from the depths and into the conversation. But if you had to ask Eli Manning if he'd do it again with those 2 Super Bowl rings on the line, and knowing that San Diego wasn't going to be winning, or at the time San Diego, I know LA now, I wasn't wrong on saying that, that he wouldn't pull that trigger 10 times over. So hopefully he's able to do that. I think the tagging of AJ Green was a huge benefit and a huge plus to show they are trying to surround him with weapons. If Tyler Boyd and John Ross stay on the field, then they already have a plethora of weapons. If they want to go grab a Justin Jefferson, in the second round, or at that 33 spot, then they have arguably one of the most well-rounded, best. I would almost call it that basketball approach of having a little bit of everything on the field: the burner, the route runner, the Pro Bowl wide receiver, a little bit of everything. But they also do need a tight end. Now that they didn't bring back Eifert, correct? They did.
Right, they have yet. No,
they did.
Yeah,
no,
so
they have yet to bring him back.
And I know he could use one of those, but he already has the Clyde Edwards-Helaire type in Joe Mixon, who can do pretty much everything. They're almost the same frame, same type of build, everything. So he has an opportunity to win, but that AFC North is going to be a tough cookie for quite some time.
I do have 2 questions after you guys get through the ceiling, floor, and the player comp. So whenever you're done with that, I do have 2 questions before we move into the superlatives.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, ceiling for me is MVP. I think he really has that ability to be a league MVP and lead a team to the Super Bowl. Floor, I think, is middle of the pack QB, just because his mental traits are too good for him to not be starting, and I can't imagine that going away. And again, the arm strength may be a little bit of a concern, but it's still above average and plenty good enough for the NFL. So say middle of the pack QB as his floor, which kind of like what Andy Dalton is with the Bengals right now. So worst case scenario, you're just drafting another Andy Dalton.
Yeah, I love your player comp for him as his ceiling. My floor for him would be Derek Carr, because he has the athleticism to move around. Somewhat questionable, maybe deep ball ability, but can hit a lot of the short and intermediate type routes. But I'll let you throw out your player comp for ceiling, because it is a definite great fit.
Yeah, my player comp is Tony Romo. I think the escapability is exactly the same. That ability to throw off of weird angles and be able to see the field when you're rolling out from a weird base and all that. And I think Tony Romo was, as a Giants fan, I can't give him too much credit, but he played on some not great teams, and I think he deserves more credit for being a very, very good quarterback than he gets from a lot of people.
I could see that. I actually really like that player comp. The accuracy, the ability to make the touch throws, the ability to escape the pocket. I think he's just a little more athletic than Tony is in terms of straight line speed and pocket mobility a little bit more. I don't think Tony Romo is going to be running by anybody.
I agree. Yeah.
And Burrow is sneaky fast. He actually can pass a linebacker and not get caught from behind.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the 2 questions I've got for you. We talked about last episode how the wide receiver class is stacked this year. So first thing I'd like to know is to have you grade the quarterback class. What do you think of the incoming quarterback class as a whole? And second here is, if you were the GM of a team like, let's say, the Dolphins, who've been stacking assets, would you make the Godfather offer to the Bengals to come up to get Joe Burrow at number 1?
So the second question is a lot harder, I think. The first question, I think the quarterback class is sneaky deep. I think outside the top 5 that we talked about, I think there's a lot of upside just in the top 5 by itself between Herbert, Eason, and Love, Burrow and Tua aside. And I think, after those top 5, there are a bunch of guys that can develop and have some nice traits to be able to work with. I think we'll get into the superlatives after the next question. So I'll leave those guys for later. But yeah, I definitely think it's deeper than people think. Not as deep as the wide receiver class, but definitely one of the deeper position groups of this draft. In terms of the Dolphins, it's tough because I can't think of one player in the NFL other than Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson that I would pay 3 first-round picks for. So I want to say no, that it's not worth it for the Dolphins to move up to 1, just because they still have a bunch of needs on their team, despite a good free agency. That I don't know. There are so few players that are worth 3 first-round picks that I don't think I would do it.
Yeah, I think for your first question, Rob, the quarterback class, I think, is top heavy. And then you have a lot of intriguing guys, a lot of, wild cards that you could see and surprise, a la like a Tony Romo that went undrafted in his draft class. There's some guys that have some intriguing traits that need some development. They're not week one starters, but it's real top heavy with a starting class, and some intriguing guys late. Now, your second question, I'm going to say absolutely not. Absolutely not. I would not trade 3 draft picks for Joe Burrow. I like Joe Burrow a lot. But in this class, if I can stay at 5 and get a Jerry Jeudy, and then maybe if I have to trade one of my late ones, or as Jack said, or Alexander, I don't remember, where you package maybe some picks up and come up and get a Jordan Love, I'd rather have a combination of 2 or 3 top 50 talent-wise players from this draft than have one Joe Burrow and no other first-round picks.
What about 2 2s and a 1, or 2 1s and a 2? Like, say,
it would have,
go for
it. It would have to be the late. I would have to give up my number 5 and the later of the first round picks and a second, and I would maybe consider it then. But even at that point, I'm still looking at what am I giving up? Am I giving up maybe a difference maker along my front 7, or even an offensive lineman that I could have blocking on my blind side for a Herbert or a Love if I'm not that much sold that Burrow's that much better than them? I would rather take, a Jeudy or an offensive tackle and take the upside swing with Jordan Love than taking maybe the sure thing right now with Joe Burrow and giving up 3 picks.
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember is this draft seems like there's so much talent in the first round that with 3 first-round picks there, you can make a really, really big difference. Like you mentioned, an offensive lineman, they're going to get pretty much anyone they want at 5 if they don't decide not to take 2 and decide to go the Herbert or Love route. But even at 7, I think 17 is our next pick. They could easily trade up a few spots and get one of the last 4 tackles available, whether it be Wirfs or Becton or whoever ends up falling. I'm in a similar boat. As much as I love Burrow, I think it's tough to give up so many valuable draft picks in a top-heavy class. So I guess we'll go into the superlatives now.
Yep, let's do it.
Cool. So I'll give my 5 categories and people who fit them. This is the superlatives, basically the best trait outside of this top 5. So my first one is strongest arm. I think Cole McDonald from Hawaii has the strongest arm outside of these top 5. He can throw from. It's so effortless the way he just chucks the ball down the field. He has a lot of arm strength, both throwing deep and with velocity. Most athletic, I think this is everyone's, Jalen Hurts. I think out of the entire class, he's the most athletic. He's got great quickness, speed, all that, and he'd be a great read option quarterback. Best poise, this is a fan favorite of Roy's, Anthony Gordon from Washington State. He's really, really impressive with staying calm in the backfield as the pocket's collapsing or rolling out and keeping his eyes downfield. I think he's gonna be he's definitely a sneaky guy outside of the top 5 who could sneak into in a few years being one of the top quarterbacks from this draft just because of that innate ability that he has that's super unique from lesser tier guys. Most accurate, this one was a little bit tough. I went with James Morgan from FIU. I think he's also another guy that both Roy and I like. His mechanics and delivery could use work. His base is narrow and he compromises some arm strength from that. But I do like his accuracy a lot. The best mechanics, Jake Fromm. He's very, very limited athletically in terms of his arm strength and running athleticism. But he's a pretty sound technical quarterback. So what do you guys think about this? And if you guys have your own superlatives?
Anthony Gordon, I think you could have put at best poise and most accurate. Watching him at the Senior Bowl, some of the touch throws that he was able to make was extremely impressive. That touchdown to, was it Claypool or was it Gandy Goldman? I think it was Claypool.
I think it was Claypool. Yeah, not positive. But.
Corner of the end zone. That one during the game, that was a beauty. It was off. He was kind of off axis when he made the throw. And it was a dime over the shoulder, exactly what you're looking for. I think he could have that Gardner Minshew I'm sure, again, like we said, it's such a saturated market right now. There's more quarterbacks than teams need, so he's obviously not going to get that opportunity. But if he was forced into that role, I think out of any of these bottom 5, I know Jalen Hurts could really do something if given a specific playbook that's tied to his skill set. But I think Anthony Gordon is the biggest sleeper out of any of these quarterbacks.
Yeah, there's two guys I want to touch on quickly from your superlatives. Great list, by the way. I just want to throw a disclaimer out there. I'm not a huge Jalen Hurts fan. I wouldn't touch him outside the 7th round or an undrafted free agent. I'm just not sold with his accuracy that he's going to be able to be a starter at any point. His upside to me is maybe Tyrod Taylor if he can tighten things up, but his processing skills do not impress me whatsoever. So I love the guy. I love his character. I love what you just said there. If you go in with a specific plan and attack that you want him to be, I just think he's not going to be anything more than a Tyrod Taylor, maybe Trace McSorley type bit piece, like gadget type. And for me, the two quarterbacks that I want to talk about quickly, you already talked about Anthony Gordon. That's my guy. I would actually, in my top 5, he's my 5th best quarterback in this class.
Same.
I like his upside way better than Eason. And after seeing his tape and doing his report, his ability to throw off platform is quite impressive. He has a baseball background. He is quite slender and lean. But we almost didn't get to know even who Gardner Minshew was because that was how close the quarterback competition was at Washington State the previous year. He had to go through a lot of different struggles. He bided his time, really dived into the playbook, and was a master at it in the 1 year he started. And I know I threw the comment out there the other day in our Slack channel about what I see his ceiling as. And I'm just going to throw it out there. I know I'm going to probably get murdered for it, but it's Tom Brady. His athleticism isn't there, but the ability to get with anticipation and throw for yards after the catch, he is an ideal target to be a Tom Brady-esque in that type of offense. I'm not saying he's the greatest, arm talent, but his release is one of the quickest I've ever seen on tape. The amount of time it gets to snap the ball off is outstanding. And I just love his ability to manipulate the pocket, roll outside, and still be able to keep his eyes down the field. So Anthony Gordon is one of my top quarterbacks in this class, and I think he's going to be somebody for years to come if he goes to the right system to where he's going to be an absolute steal. James Morgan is another one. His confidence in his arm is up there. He always looked up to Brett Favre growing up. He grew up outside of Green Bay. That's where his hometown is. And he always mimicked him. And you could see that on the field. He has elite confidence in his arm, and sometimes to his detriment because he is that accurate. He can put it in short windows. And he was a transfer from Bowling Green. He has some underrated athleticism, and he'd be a fun guy to sit behind Aaron Rodgers, being that he's a hometown kid there in Green Bay. Somewhat similar skill set to where he is athletic and can move, but he also trusts his arm and can fit it in the tight windows. So that'd be a unique kind of fit there, a hometown kid coming home and be able to sit behind, one of the big-time quarterbacks of our era.
I was going to ask you guys if – go ahead.
I was going to say, I will say this about Jalen Hurts. We've seen bigger bonehead moves made in the first round, in the top 15, the top 20 picks. Not saying he's going to be a first-round pick, but I would put money says he goes day 2, day 3. I think somebody's going to look at what Lamar Jackson's able to do. They're going to feel comfortable about their starting quarterback, but would not mind putting that in the playbook and having a Taysom Hill like role for him wherever he goes. It's starting to become that kind of league, and we still seen. I mean, if you watch Lamar Jackson throw during the Pro Bowl Challenge, he's not an accurate quarterback by any sense of the imagination. He's just got some really good weapons around him that make him look a little bit better as a passer than he actually is. Not to mention having, the best, in my opinion, 1A, 1B best offensive line with the Colts right now. That was until Yonda retired. But I think that some team is going to take a risk on him or take a swing on him in the third round. I would not be surprised just because of the upside and adding that wrinkle to the offense. Forces defenses and defensive coordinators to have to game plan for that throughout the week, which makes it that much harder to zero in on what the team does best with their basic offense when they're a normal starting quarterback under center.
And I mean, I can understand where you're coming from, Jack. I could definitely, especially with his work ethic and his approach that he had at Alabama and then when he went to Oklahoma. That would definitely endear himself to a coaching staff. Me personally, though, I don't see the upside. Like I get the package plays. I could definitely see a team taking him on, especially if like an Oakland or Las Vegas now would want to take him on and maybe develop him and give him a chance with a quarterback guru type. and improve with that athleticism, I could see the upside in what you're doing. Me personally, I wouldn't take him. But you brought up an interesting point, and I'm just going to throw out a bonus superlative here. You said about a Taysom Hill role. I think we have the next Taysom Hill, and he played quarterback at Mississippi State, and he was a transfer there this year, but he was somebody that played a role in a lot of the really good teams at Penn State the previous years. That's Tommy Stevens. He's 6'4", he's over 200 pounds. He's a really quality athlete. He just had his pro day that he's sending the tape outs to all the 32 teams. He ran in the mid 4.4s in the 40-yard dash. 6'4", 200 some pounds. He's a real unique athlete. He played receiver, running back, quarterback, Wildcat quarterback while at Penn State, and he was the starter this year at Mississippi State. So if you want to look for a Taysom Hill type player, whether it's in the 7th round or maybe undrafted free agency, keep an eye on Tommy Stevens from Mississippi State.
I was going to ask you guys, of these second 5 here, the superlative members, to give me the name that you're targeting. Both Jack and Roy already kind of gushed about Anthony Gordon. But what about you, Alex? Of the 5 there, is he your guy, or do you have a different guy amongst those names?
It's definitely Anthony Gordon also. I think, like I alluded to earlier, the ability to stay calm under pressure and like scan the field and make those throws while pockets collapsing, while guys are coming at him, is a super unique trait. A little bit like what Joe Burrow is able to do. Not comparing those two, but the way that they're able to get out of the pocket and throw off from weird bases, weird arm angles, while staying calm under pressure. I really, really value that in a quarterback, and I think Gordon's ability to do that is impressive coming as a lesser-known guy.
Yeah, those two are cold-blooded killers that you can't phase them. Does that wrap it up?
I think it does.
All right. Well, thank you for watching, and remember to hit like and subscribe and to press that notification button to be notified when we drop more top 5 prospects by position.
Blitz out.